Good evening, Brennan, and welcome to the Lodge Hope of Karachi number 337 and our 81st lockdown lecture Zoom meeting. It's a great delight as ever to welcome you along here on a Tuesday evening for your, if not daily, but your weekly advancement in Masonic education. Brennan, it's been another beautiful day here in the Kingdom of Fife, and wherever you are, I hope the sun's been shining on you. As ever, can I remind you of the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidance on Zoom meetings? Please keep your video running. If you do have bandwidth challenges, Bern, just please drop me a little note in the chat box and switch your video off. And please have your name showing so we know who you are. That's very much appreciated. As ever, can I invite you to sign our virtual tile on the Facebook pages? It just gives us that little bit of recording of who's here for posterity, Bren. Thank you so much. Well, Bren, 81 meetings in, and over the last 15 months or so, we've had Bren from all around the globe. But on this occasion, we have Brother Christopher Earnshaw joining us this evening from Japan, where it is 3 a.m. in the morning. So a huge thank you to Brother Earnshaw for getting up, in which is exactly the middle of the night out there. Brother Earnshaw shared his Masonic bio with me. He's the past Grand Historian of the Grand Lodge of Japan, past Master of the Research Lodge of the Grand Lodge of Japan. He's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, and he's past Chairman of the Education Committee. Recipient of the Order of Merit for the Grand Lodge of Japan for educational activities, and a past master of the Synim Lodge, Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. In his day job, he's a professor at the School of Social Sciences, Waseda University, Tokyo, lecturing in PPE. And he's a former professor of Asian Studies at the Daito Bunka University. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, Chris, but hopefully it's close to it. His interests are writing, the cello, dowsing, and the tarot, and he's also written a variety of books, and I'll put the links to those books on our Facebook pages later on this evening, Bern. So without further ado, it gives me the greatest of pleasure to welcome to the Lockdown Lecture Series, Worshipful Brother Christopher Earnshaw. The virtual floor is yours, sir. Chris, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, am I okay now?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, worshipful brother and brethren all. It's my pleasure to have this short talk with you this evening. If you have any questions, please keep them to the end, and please make a note so we can do things in order. I would like just to introduce myself, because I belong to lodges in 4 different constitutions in Japan. And I belong to the Grand Lodge of England, the Grand Lodge of Scotland, Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, and the Grand Lodge of Japan. The reason that this is possible, because the Grand Lodge of Japan was not established until 1957. So many Grand Lodges were operating in Japan before that date, and they're still operating here. So as worshipful brother mentioned, I teach PPE. If you're not familiar with that, it stands for Philosophy, Politics, and Economics. Tonight, I would like to talk about the possibility that Freemasonry has a Chinese origin. And I will now share the screen with you. Can everybody see this okay?
Yes. That's just coming up now, Chris.
Okay.
That's good. It there now.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So firstly, I'd just like to give you a bit of background, the reason why I have this opinion. I studied classical Japanese and Chinese literature at the University of London, and I was particularly interested in the philosophy of Mencius, the Chinese philosopher. In 2016, I was at a lecture on Chinese philosophy in Tokyo, when afterwards the Chinese lecturer asked me to, here we go. When the Chinese lecturer invited me to visit a temple in Taiwan to take part in a Taoist initiation. This only happens once a year, and it is an honor to be invited. At the initiation, I was very surprised because the initiation was nearly exactly the same as the first degree initiation in Freemasonry. So on my return, I started studying this. I was able to use the facilities at my university library. And after 2 years of research, things began to fall in place. So it resulted in me writing 4 books on what I believe to be the alchemical underpinning of the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, which includes a Chinese alchemical ritual. The books are called Spiritual Freemasonry. Where's a link to that? That's me at the initiation. I'm the guy in the middle, if you didn't notice. And those are the books. As my teaching specialty is social science, so I look at Freemasonry with the same glasses. I studied the social history of the time around 1717, when the Premier Grand Lodge was founded, which was later to become the Grand Lodge of England. And it raised many questions about the early days of the craft. For example, given England's rigid class structure, why did 3 members of the gentry decide to rewrite the ritual of stonemasons, especially as they were not manual laborers? Why did they give 8 years of their lives to this project and also decide to add a 3rd degree? Lastly, why did the aristocracy and nobility of Europe join these 3 men in a room above a tavern to study these new degrees? You may be familiar with this picture as it shows the master leaving. If I can get my remote control apps more, disable, annotate. We are, where's the little thing? Spotlight. Spotlight. Is it? Spotlight. This one. Yeah. This hanging on the here is the Rummer and Grapes Tavern. So obviously these the nobility were not going there to study morality, because the nobility would have considered themselves to be moral, God-fearing men who did not need to listen to more lectures on morality. I believe England's relationship with China probably started around 1660 with the introduction of tea. Coffee had been imported starting in 1650 from Africa and Caribbean together with slavery. Then from 1660, tea and tea shops started to become popular. The tea was Chinese and not Indian, as people would one would expect. The British East India Company then started a triangular trade, taking opium grown in India to sell in China, receiving silver, tea, and Chinaware in return. The Bodleian Library at the University of Oxford bought its first Chinese book in 1603, though they did not understand the contents. From 1658, Jesuits in Paris began to introduce books about China, with the first being The First Decades of Chinese History by Martino Martini, in which he introduced a new way to calculate Chinese history, what they called Anno Huangdi, which was of interest as it allowed for comparison of Chinese history with the Bible. In 1678, the English architect and sinologist John Webb published the Antiquity of China, in which he claimed that Chinese was the original universal language, a claim that was supported by Robert Hooke. This idea was that in ancient times, there was one language that was spoken by everyone across the world before various countries were established. This was called the universal language. At this time, it was popular for individuals to collect books about China. And similarly, in Germany, Gottfried Leibniz was studying a Chinese book on divination, the I Ching. He believed that the I Ching was the common denominator that would bring various Christian factions together by emphasizing their similarities, what he called the reunion of the churches. There was a move in London to open up trade to China using the southern route that Vasco da Gama had discovered 200 years earlier. The British East India Company was intent on dominating the Far East market, though it was constantly challenged by the stronger Dutch East India Company. However, by the late 1600s, England was importing large quantities of silk, tea, chinaware, and furniture from China. To this end, a Chinese Mandarin visiting England helped the trade effort by editing a unique map of China. I believe that there are 6 major correlations that point towards a Chinese origin for Freemasonry. First, the visit of this high-ranking Chinese official to London. Second, a vogue for Chinese at the time. Also the Gormagons, the writings of Jonathan Swift, the Scots master's degree, and finally, number 6, the correspondences with Taoism. The first correlation was that in 1687, when the Jesuit Philippe Couplet, on his way to Rome, took with him a Jesuit convert, Shen Fuzhong, a Chinese Mandarin from the southern Ming capital of Nanjing. It has been said that Shen was either the son of a doctor or a wealthy merchant. Either way, his family was one of distinction, as we can see by the way he dressed. It has been suggested that Shen also had a knowledge of Chinese medicine and, by extension, alchemy. It has been recorded that in a meeting with Robert Boyle, when Shen was asked about how many Chinese characters a person must learn, he replied that he himself was a master of between 10 and 12,000 of them, indicating a high education. In current China, modern functional literacy is about 5,000 characters, and an advanced literacy is about 8,000 characters. So Shen's 14,000 characters is quite remarkable. Shen had also been educated in Latin, which made him ideal for the visit to Europe, because most educated people at that time understood Latin. Though Shen's ability in Latin was said to have been a little imperfect. Couplet and Shen first arrived in Paris in 1684, where Shen was received royally in France and attended a banquet with King Louis XIV. From Paris, Coupley and Shen arrived, traveled to Rome, and where they arrived in 1685, meeting with Pope Innocent XI. The pair again returned to Paris, where Shen was asked to catalogue Chinese books in King Louis XIV's Royal Library. And while he was there, Shen also prepared a Latin translation of Confucius. In the summer of 1687, Shen travelled alone to London on his way to Lisbon, where he intended to finish his training to become a priest. He was introduced to Thomas Hyde, a scholar of Hebrew at the University of Oxford and chief librarian of the Bodleian Library. Hyde invited Shen to Oxford to also help catalogue their collection of Chinese books, and he translated some of the books and the maps at the Bodleian Library. The two worked in the intermediate language of Latin, with Hyde actually praising Shen's ability. According to letters we have between Shen and Hyde, we know what Shen worked on. And to begin with, Shen even had to show Hyde which direction to read Chinese characters. Hyde was particularly interested in Chinese board games, and Shen also explained the Chinese weights and measure system, as well as their calendrical system. As trade with China was a major concern of the British East India Company, Shen also helped annotate a map of China that the Bodleian possessed, which had been made in the early 1600s, which was later called the Selden map, because an accurate map would have been a valuable commodity. From Hyde's letters to Shen, we can see that they also discussed the Yi Jing, as well as Chinese temples and Taoism. In May of that year, Shen had an audience with King James II, who then commissioned England's leading portrait painter, Godfrey Kneller, to paint Shen's portrait, the Chinese convert, the picture we saw previously, which the king then kept in his bedroom. This is significant because kings normally kept paintings of their family or mistresses in their private quarters. So I believe that James regarded Shen very highly. The second correlation is the interest at the time in Chinese things, and only a few Europeans had ever visited China. For example, the French historian Jean-Baptiste du Halde drew the illustrations for his famous book on China just by interviewing Jesuits in Paris. So the limited knowledge of China just increased the mystery about its culture. And Chinese ideas were then popular among intellectuals who saw Chinese society as an ideal meritocracy. Around the 1700s, the classical style of Louis XIV furniture was replaced by a more ornamental style called Rococo, which was characterized by small details such as shells, leaves, flowers, and even cherubs, I suppose. And on the back of this, an exotic Chinese motif was introduced, which became known as Shinwasuri, featuring dragons, strange birds, and fantastic landscapes, as well as these interesting architectural patterns. In England, the Shinwasuri style was quickly adopted by architects in both interior designs and also for small pavilions and in garden layouts. An early adopter was Viscount Cobham, who had a garden pavilion built in Chinese style at his house in Stowe in 1738, which he called the Chinese House. The architect, Sir William Chambers, had visited China 3 times with the Swedish East India Company, so he understood Chinese architecture well. At the bequest of the Princess of Wales, he first built a House of Confucius in 1749, followed by a pagoda in 1762, both of them in the Royal Gardens at Kew. The House of Confucius fell into disrepair and was later demolished, but the pagoda still stands. A cartoon by George Cruikshank, done in 1816, shows courtiers had erected a scaffold to help Prince George get on his house when he was leaving the House of Confucius in Kew, which is in the background. And also we can see the pagoda. It also shows 4 Chinese servants, though this is now thought to be to show the king's interest in Orientalism, and not that he actually had Chinese servants. George's gouty feet can also be seen heavily bandaged. George had a good appetite, both in quality and quantity, and at the time he became Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of England in 1792, he weighed about 22 stone, which is about 140 kilos and more than twice what I weigh. He was often lampooned in the press and in cartoons. English aristocracy were early adopters of Shinwasuri, as they wanted to be seen as leaders of fashion. In 1770, James Caulfield, 1st Earl of Charlemont, hired Chambers to design a pair of large dragons, here we are on the top of here, for his stately home in Merino House in Dublin. The interior of some rooms in Claydon House, owned by Ralph Verney, 2nd Earl Verney, were redesigned in the Shinwasuri style, of which it is said the Chinese room, one of the most extraordinary rooms in the house, if not in England. In 1761, King George III bought the Duke of Buckingham's townhouse to use as his Queen's Palace for his consort, Queen Charlotte. The palace was enlarged and many small reception rooms were furnished in the Shinwasuri style. You can see Chinese pictures here. The Queen's Palace was later enlarged and renamed Buckingham Palace. We can see the difference in the color of the stone from here. The old palace is here and the new palace has been added on the front. Carlton House in Pall Mall was the residence of the Prince Regent, and renovations were done to the old building, helped by Chambers, one of which was adding a Chinese-style drawing room. In 1792, the Prince Regent was to become the Grand Lodge of England's first Royal Grand Master, and later in 1820, King George IV. Since 1786, the Prince Regent had been under a financial cloud and was being investigated by Parliament for the extravagant amount of money spent on rebuilding Carlton House and also a summer villa by the sea, the Royal Pavilion, at Brighton in the south of England. The pavilion was loosely inspired by the Taj Mahal, and though not Chinese, the interior had many Chinese objects, as well as stained glass windows of Chinese figures, one of which looks like the Taoist saint Guang Yu. George's interior designer, Frederick Crace, was not so concerned about cultural authenticity, but rather wanted to make the pavilion interesting and oriental. The third correlation is that in 1725, the Premier Grand Lodge introduced what may be a Chinese third degree. The reason for calling it this is explained in detail in my books, but it may be not appropriate in front of a mixed audience. This was soon followed by the Chinese order of the Gormagons and their famous parades, where they paraded the Premier Grand Lodge, the Moderns. This is meant to be de Sagulier. This is James Anderson. I believe this person here is the Duke of Montague, and that person here is George Payne. But they are not identified as such, but it seems to be correct. Nowadays, people consider the Gormagons to be a farce invented by the fifth Grand Master, Philip, Duke of Wharton, to embarrass the Premier Grand Lodge, as he felt insulted by being summarily made to resign as Grand Master. The Gormagons are important for several reasons, not only that it shows that there is a connection between Freemasons and an interest in China, but secondly, that there was opposition to Freemasonry at the time. In this etching by Hogarth, called The Mystery of Masonry, brought to light by ye Gormagons, drawn in 1724, there are 4 Chinese nobles. The Emperor, the Volgi, who is the Grand Master, this person here, the philosopher, and a Mandarin are leading a Masonic procession, suggesting that Hogarth wanted to show that Freemasons were following Chinese sages. This is meant to be Confucius. These are 2 Mandarins. The fourth correlation is that around 1726, the Irish author Jonathan Swift published a letter titled "A Letter from the Grand Mistress of the Female Freemasons," which seems to be a sort of literary prank, but at the same time, it raises many interesting questions. In it, Swift referred to Freemasonry and a Chinese connection, and I quote, "Under the censure of the venerable Chinese Brahman, whose history of the rise, progress, and decay of Freemasonry, writ in the Chinese tongue, is lately translated into a certain European language." By this, I think Swift meant Latin. This Chinese sage says, "The greatest part of current Masons judge of the mysteries and use of that sacred art, just as a man perfectly illiterate judges of an excellent book." It is believed that Swift was not a Freemason, as in his writings he suggests that Masons be hanged on the gallows, but he was cognizant of many facts concerning Freemasonry. The letter from the Grand Mistress of the Female Freemasons refers to 3 degrees, so is post 1725, probably written around 1726 or 27, when Swift spent 2 years in London. Many details about Freemasonry in the letter are obviously incorrect, but Swift suggests that Freemasons' understanding of the mysteries was superficial, according to a Chinese sage who may also be a priest. So Swift may have been referring to the Chinese Mandarin, Shen Fuzhong. Swift's letter is interesting as it again shows that there was knowledge of a Chinese connection to Freemasonry, and that around 1724 to 1727, the craft was not held in high regard as it was being satirized in the press and in paintings. The fifth correlation is that the nascent appendant bodies of Freemasonry were also being influenced by the Orientalism vogue, with Chinese words being introduced into several degrees. For example, the Scots Master's degree of 1730, the Irish Master degree of 1740, the Ilu of the 15, and the Senior Architect of 1760, which was part of a 7-degree ritual, where Sivi was said to mean bend the knee, Qi was Chinese for all rise, and Xin Chu was a password meaning the seat of the soul. This suggests that Chinese words were used in some Masonic rituals, both in England and France, for over 50 years. I think we need a little bit of background on China here. So there's a couple of words about that. In 1683, we saw the introduction of the brutal Qing government in the lands south of the Yangtze River. Though northern China had been invaded and conquered by the Manchus in 1644, it took another 40 years for the whole country to be subjugated. Then secret societies started around the 1650s to oppose this Qing government and protect the southern Ming emperor. Many brethren interested in martial arts will have heard of the Shaolin monastery, where Shaolin Kung Fu was invented. The monks that died at the monastery were on their way to protect the southern Ming emperor. The fragmented groups of secret societies joined together under banners and blood oaths and became known as the Tian Di Hui, or Heaven and Earth Societies, eventually becoming a nationwide organization. The Tian Di Hui built loyalty houses across the country, each run by 3 brothers. This is an artist's picture of what it may have looked like. This is the entrance, and the actual loyalty house would have been inside here. This sign reads Tian Di Hui. You have to read it from right to left, Heaven and Earth Society. And the flags here on both sides say, down with the Qing and restore the Ming. In 1662 was the revival of the Shenzhen School of Taoism in the south of Nanjing, where the Southern Emperor was, after a gap of 130 years, which would have been well received at court, as it is said that the Chinese have Confucian skin, Buddhist bones, but a Taoist heart. I believe that there is a strong correspondence between the first degree and the Taoist initiation ceremony, which has been faithfully repeated in China since 200 BC. And many of the elements of a Freemason's lodge, such as the furniture, ornaments, and movable jewels, all have similar Chinese lessons. In spite of this, many Masonic historians do not agree with a Chinese connection. This may be for jingoistic Victorian reasons, because speculative Freemasonry was conceived in England, specifically London. However, the Enlightenment was a time when the intelligentsia were open to new ideas. As things Chinese were vogue at the time, it is not a leap of imagination to believe that the first three Grand Masters were also interested in China. One reason for dismissing a Chinese connection to Freemasonry may be a paper which was published in AQC, Ars Quattro Coronatorum, in 1889 by the Mason and Sinologist Challoner Alabaster, who was fluent in Mandarin. He wrote an article for the Hong Kong Telegraph about Freemasonry in China. In the article, Alabaster recognized the similarity of the sworn brotherhood and mutual support of Freemasonry to that of the Tian de Hui, the Chinese secret societies. But he said that as there was no Solomon, Harem, or Temple of Jerusalem, then there could be no connection between them. However, in Alabaster's paper, he added a tantalizing statement. I have found existing there, meaning secret societies, a mystic faith on which there seems some reason to believe our craft is founded. However, he did not follow up on this statement, which implies a connection to Taoism. Lastly, the Taoist ceremony of receiving the light is very similar to the first degree in Freemasonry. There are small differences, such as in Freemasonry, members do not wash their hands on entering the lodge as is done in Taoism. Instead, they wear white gloves, but for the same reasons, to signify purity of heart and mind, and secondly, that they are entering a sanctified space. Since the 1660s, when tea was first introduced into England, the Chinese also produced special teacups for Westerners to use. They were the same shape as the porcelain cups used in China, but they had handles attached. In a similar way, I believe the Tao ceremony, as used in the first degree, was slightly adapted for foreigners, without an insistence on incense or kowtows. With the exception of the altar, Tao temples have very little ornamentation, and often they are not purpose-built. So unlike Christian churches, they do not face a certain direction. The reason being that the Tao is emitted from the Wu Qi, the void of all potential, and so transcends the 5 elements and 8 directions. In reality, many Masonic lodges also do not actually face east, despite what is written in the ritual. Here I ought to add a short explanation about Tao. There are 3 major schools of Tao: a philosophical Tao, a religious magic Tao, and a shamanistic Tao. The Tao that comes to most people's minds is that of red temples with dragons and statues of fierce gods with long black beards. This is the religious magical Tao. However, what I'm referring to is the Shen Qian school of Taoism, which is a philosophical Taoism with none of the red paint, dragons, or fierce gods. The Shen Qian based its teachings on the philosophers Confucius, Mencius, and Lao Tzu, and the temples are much simpler. Like a lodge, a temple is run by 3 officers, 2 commanders, and the light pointing and transmitting master, who can be thought of as guardians of the light. The 3 candles on the Taoist altar, representing the limitless potential of the universe, called Wu Qi, the sun and the moon, are similar to the 3 lesser lights of Freemasonry, the sun, moon, and the worshipful master. In the same way that the master brings the light to the east in the candidate, light from the east to the candidate, the Tao master brings the light from the Wu Qi to the candidate. Like Freemasonry, Tao secrets can only be transmitted and initiations done when these 3 candles are lit. On the wall above the altar are the words in Chinese, Ming Ming Shang Di, meaning enlightened God, similar to the Ji above the master of a lodge. Shenqian Taoism is not a religion, but more like a philosophy of light, of life, just like Freemasonry. In my books, I've summarized 26 correspondences between the Tao ritual and Freemasonry's first degree. Both the ritual and the design of the lodge, the 2 ashlars, the blazing star, all have correspondences with Taoism. The first book compares the Taoist initiation with the first degree initiation. I put his, and this is the Wu Qi, the special candle with the design on it. The second book, my second book, looks at Western alchemy and the second degree. The third book looks at the social concerns of the day, especially concerning Catholicism and a quest for immortality. And the last book analyzes the growth of appendant bodies, as well as the life-changing hidden teaching of the third degree. In summary, to answer the questions I asked at the beginning, I believe the reason 3 members of the gentry decided to rewrite the rituals of stonemasons was because they had found through Shen and Thomas Hyde a mystical practice to prove that immortality was a fact at a time when the validity of the soul and immortality were being challenged in society at large. They gave 8 years of their lives to this project because rewriting the degrees to hide these secret teachings in a cipher was very involved work. They added the third degree because alchemy was a 3-step process, both in Europe and in China. Lastly, the reason the aristocracy and nobility of Europe joined Anthony Sayre, George Payne, and John de Sagulier in a room above a tavern was not to study morality, but to learn the secrets of this Chinese mystical Taoism. The Swedish theologian and philosopher Emanuel Swedenborg was a Mason, and he practiced these lessons, which he wrote about in detail in his book, The Heavenly Doctrine. Things Chinese were in vogue at the time of the start of the Premier Grand Lodge in 1717. Chinese philosophy influenced intellectuals such as Hyde and Leibniz, and this was followed closely by the Royal Society, which had been established in 1661. The Prince of Wales, Freemasonry's first Royal Grand Master in 1792, was interested in Shinwasuri as well as trading with China. After the introduction of the third degree in 1725, other rituals such as the Scots Master degree sprung up and incorporated Chinese words as both directions and passwords. When the disgraced Duke of Wharton, the second aristocratic Grand Master, plotted to bring down Freemasonry, he chose a Chinese-themed society, the Chinese Order of the Gormagons. Many wrote about the correspondences between the craft and Chinese secret societies, including Jonathan Swift and diplomats based in China. However, what they did not see was that it was Taoism that was the link between China and Freemasonry. I hope this short talk has piqued your interest in the subject, and thank you for your attention.
Worshipful brother, Professor Christopher Earnshaw, I think you have certainly piqued many of our brethrens' interest in what is a very interesting take on the origins of our beloved craft. As you'll know, as Scots Freemasons, we're very proud of our belief that it originated here in Scotland, and to hear another take on it and how you've connected those dots certainly has posed a lot of questions in my mind this evening, and I'm sure it has for many of the brethren here.
If I may add something, I believe Scotland's role in Freemasonry was on the operative side, not on the speculative side. And so in Edinburgh, the early lodges that were meeting there had many accepted members, probably more than 60–70% of the membership were accepted members. And you had some, I forget their names, but you had some aristocrats, particularly the Master of the Works, who was a member of some of the lodges. And I believe because the Master of the Works, and I forget his name, Alexander something?
We would have had Shaw, would have been one of them.
Anyway, he had access to the King's Royal Purse. And so because he had access to the funds to build and repair buildings in Scotland, anybody who was associated with building would want to be his friend. And so when he joined this lodge, because he wanted to have better communication with the guild, the workers, he wanted to know them better, then everybody else followed him. I feel that's how things started. Anyway.
Thank you. We do have some comments and questions in the chat box for you, Chris. Let me just scroll back up and move that to the side slightly. First question is, it was given before the talk started, and Brother Ron Mann asked, I know the talk is on Chinese Masons, but how are Japanese Masons doing? So how's your Freemasonry over there?
So we have basically three types of Masons in Japan. We have foreigners who live here, like myself, who are expats. I was working in the banking industry and I stayed here. Then we have Japanese nationals, and the third party are American military servicemen who are working. We have over nearly 85 military bases in this small country. And I think it's 100,000 US servicemen working here, as well as 3 aircraft carriers, because of the tension with North Korea and China and Taiwan, of course. So we have this mixture of mainly Europeans like myself, who are interested in more occult part of Freemasonry. The Japanese really do not understand Freemasonry at any depth, and this has been a problem for us for a long time. My books are presently being translated, or completed to be translated into Japanese, which I finished last month. Hopefully it'll be the book will be published in Japanese for the Japanese brethren at the end of the year. That'll start the conversation among them, I hope. The third group of military Masons, they're not allowed off their base very often, so they tend to keep to themselves. We have lodges on the bases, or sometimes out close to the base, and so they're a kind of third group. Sometimes we meet, but not that so often. We have only about 2,000 Masons in Japan, and some 15 lodges under the Grand Lodge of Japan. However, the Grand Lodge of Scotland has 2 lodges, and I'm a member of lodge in Yokohama, Scottish Lodge in Yokohama. We don't have an English, we do have an English Grand Lodge. It's in Kobe, and there's some Philippine lodges, and there's Prince Hall lodges, and one Massachusetts lodge. So we have quite a lot of activity. Unfortunately, education doesn't rank very high among our groups. We try with the Research Society, but yes, I feel we're not on the level of a country like America, Canada, or India, for example. Japanese Grand Lodge came from the Philippines. Originally, there were Philippine lodges in Japan, which decided to get together, set up their own Grand Lodge. And so that history means that it's a fairly young history and not that well informed, unfortunately. But we try. We do a lot of charitable work. We are surprisingly quite rich. At the end of the war, General MacArthur, together with some Freemasons, were able to buy some land right in the center of Tokyo, where Tokyo Tower is. And in the years after following that, we have 2 high-rise buildings. I think they're both 50-story buildings from which we receive rental income. And with that rental income, we have built ourselves a beautiful Grand Lodge, and we're able to do a lot of charitable activities. However, on the other side, the Japanese population don't regard Freemasonry very highly. That is due to the sensational writing of many journalists and people who want to sell a book quickly. So they write about, for example, Freemasonry is a Jewish idea to overtake the banking system of the world, starting with Japan, or something nonsense like that. But there is suspicion, and if I mention I'm a Freemason to a Japanese person, often their face will go white. They'll be kind of startled. But we're working slowly to change this, but it's an uphill battle. It's that in a nutshell.
Oh, Chris, thank you very much, because I think that further educates us all here about our 2 lodges, the other one being in Kobe in Japan. Alan Keegan comments, fascinating stuff, Christopher, and thanks for doing this at what must be a very odd time for you. And yes, we all give you our thanks for that. He goes on to say, I was anticipating a mention of Elias Ashmole. I recently finished the Hiramic Legend and the Ashmolean Theory by W. Hextall. Does he feature in your books or studies?
Yes, he does, and unfortunately not very highly. So Ashmole was a collector. He was a publisher. He wasn't a writer. Well, yes, he did write some books, but I don't know how active he was as a Freemason. We do know that he was one of the first Freemasons in England, and we have anecdotes about him. The Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University was donated by Ashmole, but a lot of those items that were donated were actually stolen from his next door neighbor, a person called Tradescant. Tradescant was a collector, a serious collector. He had, his whole house was covered in things. The ceilings, there was also things attached to the ceilings. And Ashmole, he wanted that collection, and he stole it. after her tradescant died, and tradescant's wife, Hester Pook, interesting name, Hester Pook, died in mysterious circumstances. She drowned in her pond in her garden. And the week after she died, Ashmole wrote in his diary that he went into her house and took all her paintings. You know, he wasn't a very moralistic person. Because he died before the Premier Grand Lodge was established, I think his influence on the early Grand Masters was limited.
Thank you. Ian Walk comments, what an interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Well done. Even included themes seen in previous lectures in this series. Yeah, one of our previous speakers, Chris, brought in the subject of the Gormagons a few months ago. So that was nice to see that come back round. Ian McIntosh, a fascinating and thought-provoking angle from the Chinese. Alan Turton, Chris, fascinating. Thank you so much. How much of the correlations are things that we share as humanity around the world?
Yes, so I'm often asked this, but when you have two things that are so similar, perhaps on 2 or 3 points, fine, this is something that perhaps people around the world who are thinking people, who are spiritual people, may come to the same conclusions. Maybe in Africa, the Hopi Indians, etc. But when you have 28 correlations that are all so close, I just do not see that this is coincidental. I think this was thought about, and the Chinese ideas, for example, the ashlars, the 2 ashlars fit so well with Chinese philosophy that it's, I took a Chinese professor to visit our Grand Lodge, and I showed him the things, and he was so surprised. He felt that, you know, he was like back in a Taoist temple. It's just, though it didn't, the colors were different, but the layout and everything else was exactly the same. He felt at home.
Another interesting question from Dickon Sandbach. What is the history of the Gormagons before the Duke of Wharton made use of it when he tried to ridicule the Premier Grand Lodge? Did it originate in China, or was it an invention, perhaps based on a little knowledge of China?
Yes, I think it was the latter, and I give reasons for this in my book. I believe the Duke of Wharton invented the Gormagons because he made an announcement in the newspaper, one of the newspapers, that there was going to be a Chinese organization. They would not allow the King George III or the Prince Regent to be members. He made a point about that. It's to do with the Jacobite situation in England at the time. And this is really important because the Premier Grand Lodge was very elitist, and they tried to, first of all, get nobility to become the Grand Masters, and they only let the best people in. At the time, there was a lot of prejudice against Scots and Irish in London, and so the Scots and Irish then joined the Grand Lodge of the Ancients. Well, Grand Lodge of the Ancients wasn't established until 1751. So before that, they were joining the St. John's Lodges. So we had 2 groups. We had the Scots, who tended to be Jacobites, of course, supporting the Old Pretender, and the Irish as well, who were Catholics, and they had their own organization. On the other side, the moderns, and then the ancients. And it wasn't just differences in opinion. The ritual was nearly the same, I believe. There were some differences. For example, the ancients included the Royal Arch degree as their 4th degree. And we can see from this that it has a very religious story to it, which changes the whole meaning of the rituals of the ancients. The moderns only had a 3-degree ritual. It has no overt religion in it. It has no chivalry, no Templars, nothing like that. But the ancients had brought in this very glamorous and theatrical Royal Arch degree, which, because everybody was Catholic, they enjoyed it very much. And so we had the Jacobites and the I think Hanoverians is probably the other way to. The Jacobites, there is a lot of talk about them being a kind of bastion for the reintroduction of the king. It would have been then the King James III to come to England to take the throne, and these Jacobites in the Grand Lodge of the Ancients would be that supporting group in England to help take the throne. Of course, James III wasn't, he was James Stuart. He had tried to get support from the Vatican. He had tried to get support from King Louis XIV, and also from the Spaniards. All these Catholic countries were trying to retake the Protestant England, and he wanted to be the spear front of it with these Jacobite Freemasons in London as his supporters. And luckily for England, I suppose, it didn't come about. And so the story is, and we can see this in the English 3rd degree, because we are given the substitute for the lost word. We're given 2 of them, MHB and MBN, MBN and MHB. The reason we have 2 of them, because one represents the word password for the moderns and one for the ancients. And in 1813, when they joined to become the United Grand Lodge of England, they both refused to give up their password. So we both have these 2 words. And one of them refers to the widows, is, I believe, and I'm taking this from the textbooks, but it's Gaelic for the widow's son. The widow's son would have been James, because he was the son of the his mother was a widow. So it was again a kind of suggestion of the Jacobite origins of the Grand Lodge of the Ancients. And so this was a force at the time, and it was quite difficult, I think, for the 2 Grand Lodges to join in 1813. It must have been quite difficult. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
I think that was a fantastic answer to that question. And the talk of the Jacobites and the Jacobite Freemasonry, it's a lovely segment to our next comment, which comes from Brother Ian McIntosh, who is our resident expert on Jacobean Freemasonry and has presented at this lockdown lecture series over the course of the last 15 months. And his comment is quite a contemporary one comparatively to the Jacobites, and it's about that Ian has a reference in December 1915 to a Scottish brother who was shipwrecked during the war and was well looked after by the Baron of Lodge Yokohama, number 1066, and their Right Worshipful Master, Brother Taylor. You see, so Ian also has a huge knowledge about the war years in Freemasonry, particularly in Dundee area, Chris.
Yes, sorry, this is my interest in Freemasonry is the years 1716 to 1750. My reason for this is I want to know why Freemasonry was set up. What was the objective? Why do people want to bring, for example, we call it a peculiar system of morality. but there's nothing peculiar at all about it. It's based on classical literature, Cicero and people like that. It also introduces morality from the Bible. So what is peculiar about that? Well, if they were talking about a Chinese morality, then I think peculiar would be an interesting word to use to describe that. Also, we call the master's chair the Oriental chair. Well, Oriental, that's the Far East, that's China. So, all these small hints here and there. Anyway, please, next question.
Sandy Thompson asks, are there any lodges in China?
Not in mainland, what we call mainland China, but of course in Hong Kong we have, I think we have 3 Grand Lodges there, England, Scotland and Ireland. Yes, and in Macau we have, what do we have in Macau? A brother wrote to me from Macau just recently, I forgot. And then in Taiwan we have the Grand Lodge of China in Taipei in China. So yes, and the Grand Lodge of Taipei is in a similar situation to Japan. It's about 2,000 members, but they take things very seriously in China, a little bit more than we do here, I think. Yes.
Brother John White comments, certainly thought-provoking, and thank you, Brother Chris, for all your Masonic related information and speculation. Since we're all speculative, then why not speculate that all knowledge and light comes from the East? Why not? Lovely comment there. Laird Alan Maitland, very interesting food for thought. Alan, you'll not be able to sleep tonight for thinking that, going round and round in your mind. Martin Gunn, very interesting lecture. Thank you, Brother Christopher. Must go take care, Bern. Ian Anderson, sorry, I'll have to leave. Fascinating discussion. Many thanks to Brother Earnshaw. Brother Earnshaw knows some history. Well, there's an accolade for you, Chris. Fascinating talk. Thank you. Michael Hearn, 3 districts meet in Zetland Hall, Hong Kong. That's the ones you've just mentioned. And Brother Chris, that comes to the end of the questions that we've got here this evening. And can I just reiterate the thanks from the members of the Lodge Hope of Karachi and all our guests, not just from Scotland, but from all around the world. We've got Brian here from Canada, Bulgaria, Chile, France, England, Wales. So it's great that they've come here and you've given this insight and new subject. And I'm sure, Brian, that we will continue the discussion on Facebook later on this evening when I do get the chance to post some links and comments up. But Chris, thank you once again, sir. It's very much appreciated.
You're welcome. Yes. Well, I look forward to receiving the video, and also I'd like to bring the attention of the brethren to on my website on YouTube. I have lots of short videos, about 50 or 60 of them on various subjects, and only a couple of them about China. So this is from some of the papers I wrote when I was running the research lodge. So if you're interested, please go. The site on YouTube is called Spiritual Freemasonry.
I will be sharing that with the Bren this evening, Chris. So we will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Brethren, next week we have got a Scottish brother, Brother Nabil Gandur. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. Brother Nabil is a Jordanian. He's from the Jordan Lodge, number 1339, Scottish Constitution. And he's going to introduce us to 8 knowledge areas of Masonic education and what they've done out in the Middle East, and a little bit of the history of Freemasonry out there. Next week, the session will not be recorded, brethren. So I encourage you to come along, and that is a request from next week's speaker due to the sensitivities of living in that particular part of the world and being a Freemason. And I think Brother Chris touched on that with the views of the Japanese towards Freemasonry. So you can understand why we won't be recording next week, Brian. So I do encourage you to come along next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. With that, Brian, please feel free to we've maybe got one more comment. Michael, we have a few ex-China lodges domiciled in the UK. Shanghai Tuscan meets in London. Daintree Lodge ex-YYWay meets in Botley. And Ian Kennedy, very thought-provoking. And on that, Brian.
If I could just actually raise a point about this. In places like San Francisco and other seaports in America, they have also Chinese lodges with the square and compasses, but they're not Freemasons. They're Hong Chinese. They established themselves in the 1900s when the Chinese were used for slave labor to help build railways in America. And they established these lodges, and they wanted to be accepted. They heard about Freemasonry, and they just put the square and compasses on, but they're actually Hongmen, they're called. So it's slightly different from Freemasons.
And that is one of the common photographs that gets shared from London with the Hongmen's Lodge. It's a red with the gold writing, Brian. I'm sure you've all seen it. But Brian, please feel free to unmute, say your thank yous to Brother Christopher Earnshaw and your good nights to each other. Thank you, Brian, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, superb, Chris.
Very
Late night for you, but thank you for staying up. Catch you next week, brother. Good night, guys.
Absolutely superb. From a very learned man, might I add.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really enjoyed that. Learned a lot tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Excellent lecture. Excellent lecture.
Arigato, Christopher.
Thank you.
And thank you, Gordon. And good night, brethren.
Good night.
Brother Christopher, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very, very much.
I'll give you 5, Brian.
Good night, Gordon.
And 4, because there's just about 12 of us left, and 3. And 2, and we've got Iceland here as well. Christian, good to see you, sir. So we're truly global.
Romania's still here, Gordon.
Yeah, I think Claudio's here as well. And we've even got Edinburgh with Jim Peaston. And 1, Brian. Thank you once again.